Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Elizabeth Wamberg. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you are new here. Today, we're talking about how you, yes, you are not responsible for a response to your boundary. So you are responsible for setting the boundary, you're responsible for maintaining the boundary, and you are responsible for how you go about doing that initially, but you are not responsible for any type of response or pushback or challenging, we'll say, responses to the boundary you've set. Okay, so first I want to talk about a few things about boundaries before we get into this concept. So boundaries are healthy. They're important. They're a key part of maintaining balance in your life. They're a key part of having peace in your life. They're a key part of having structure, of having just think of them as guidelines and kind of filters. And they're ways, they're not bad. They're ways that we can communicate to other people what is okay for me, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, so that you can show up as your best self. So if you have any programming around boundaries make me a bad person, or I'm not thoughtful or caring or whatever, any of that, now is the time to delete that. Now is the time to rewrite that. Okay. Boundaries are an integral part to having a peaceful, flourishing life, and flourishing in all areas. So it's how you have structure and clarity in your job, in your personal relationships, in with yourself, any and all that. You need to have boundaries in all areas of your life. So if you feel like, well, I can't set boundaries because it makes me a bad person, let's try and work on letting that go today. And just remember, again, boundaries are just information about how to best interact with the world around you and the world around you to interact with you, so that you can protect your peace, protect your energy, so you can show up as you that is healthy and whole. So once we have boundaries set in place and we understand them as, like, they're just information, and then even looking at it, not just for you, they're the ways that you know how to interact in a healthy, loving way with people you love and care about, with your job, with the earth, with nature. I mean, it's how we can have a thriving relationship with not just other people, but with everything in our life. So boundaries are very, very important. They're very healthy, and they're absolutely necessary if we want to feel any type of like peace and clarity and just general, again, flourishing, the ability to show up in a way that is healthy and whole and committed in our lives. And then due to the circumstances in our life, due to what's going on at a certain time, due to things changing, due to any and all of that, our boundaries do change. So some of them might be the same your whole life. You might say like, well, I'm not doing this particular thing for my whole life. Or they might change, once you hit a certain age, or once you're at a certain job, or in different relationships, they look different, right? So your boundaries can change, and it is important to update them. It is important to think about, this used to work for me, but now it doesn't, or it works in this particular relationship, but not this one, right? So you need to update and change your boundaries always throughout your life. Again, it can be due to your circumstances changing, due to your values changing. And a lot of times, sometimes we don't realize we need a certain boundary until we go through a certain experience, or we get some information, some feedback from the world, and we realize, okay, actually, I do need to change and update my boundary. And all that is perfectly okay. It's very healthy to, maybe you're just going through a time where you need more rest, so you need to have less interaction with the outside world, or maybe there's a time where you're going through something else, or this other relationship is a priority, so you need to have different boundaries with other things, right? So the key thing with boundaries, remembering it's what you need to feel comfortable and protected and at peace. Boundaries are not, this is where a lot of people get messed up and why boundaries can feel so sticky and bad. Boundaries are not something you set to like punish someone else. Boundaries are in support of what you need for yourself to show up in a thriving, loving, healthy way, and not in a way for you to like punish, manipulate, control, guilt trip someone else, right? So an example of a healthy boundary would be, I'm not going to go out past 10 p.m. because I want to work on getting more sleep and taking care of myself. That's healthy. An unhealthy way that boundary might show up would be like, well, I saw my friends didn't invite me to this thing, so I'm never inviting them to anything I do ever again, and I'm not going out with them anymore, right? So do you see the difference? The boundaries that is like a way to punish someone, control them, manipulate them, right? Or like, well, this person didn't call me back, so I'm not going to call them back, right? So there's a lot of ways that the ego can get very self-justified and really like, yeah, this is working, this is a boundary for me, this is what I need, when actually it's not helpful or healthy to anyone. But it's again self-righteous. It's not actually helping. So again, with boundaries, we need to look at, am I doing this for a healthy reason, or am I doing it in an unhealthy way? Once you've done your work, once you've cleaned up your side of the street, once you realize, okay, I am setting this boundary in a healthy way, it's coming from a place that is to have the relationship or the job or whatever be able to be more flourishing, be more healthy, then you want to think about boundaries as a way to attempt to make things better, to make the interactions more harmonious, to continue the relationship. So just think about boundaries as not, it's not personal. Unless someone's doing it in an unhealthy way, then okay, of course, you don't want to engage with that. But if someone is just setting a healthy boundary with you, it's not something they have the capacity for, the ability to show up in that way. Don't take it personally. Just try to reframe it as like, okay, this is someone trying to lengthen, like to make longer our relationship together. And so I want to honor that because I care about them. Right. So again, just knowing that, boundaries are very healthy. They are very, we need them, absolutely necessary. They teach us how to communicate with each other. They teach us how to protect our own energy. They teach us how to, it's just information more with that. Okay, so that's boundaries 101. So once we got through all of that, now we're going to talk about you are not responsible for anyone's response to your boundary. Okay, so again, once you've made sure that your boundary is like in favor of you and it's in a way like that's like, well, I need this to honor myself, to nourish myself, to all of this, right? And not trying to punish or control or manipulate someone or something else. Once you've done that and you have your, okay, this is the boundary I need, I'm doing it in good faith. Then it's up to you to clearly state your boundary, however that looks like for you. Sometimes we verbally communicate it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's just like a decision we withhold within ourselves. And it's up to you to figure out how you want to do that. But again, you cannot control someone else's response to your boundary. So even if you have the most pure intentions, even if you think I'm doing this because I want to continue closeness with this person, because, this is the only way I can show up to this dynamic anymore, or whatever the case may be, right? You still cannot control if someone doesn't like your boundary, period. Okay. And so sometimes we think like, oh, well, if someone has a bad response to my boundary or a negative response to my boundary, or they don't like it, that means I set an incorrect boundary, or I was wrong, or I need to rethink that. Okay. That's not true. If your boundary, again, is coming from this place of like, you've said it in good faith, you've clearly stated it, you didn't like attack or manipulate or punish or anything like that, someone not accepting your boundary doesn't mean anything about you. Okay. So someone's response to your boundary that might not feel the best would be, they could tell you you're overreacting. They can tell you you're too sensitive. They can call you a name. They can, especially if you know them pretty well, they can try to emotionally manipulate you in like a way that's, they know you're sensitive to. They can try to get you to change your boundary, to cancel it, to adjust it, guilt trip you, like say how much you've hurt them. Any and all of these things are common responses that people have when they don't like your boundary and they want to try to push back onto it. And again, you are not responsible for that. You're just responsible for clearly stating your boundary, because there are people in your life who are healthy, and obviously it's way easier to set boundaries with them. If you call your friend and say, this example of like, I'm not going out past 10 p.m. anymore because I don't want to whatever. And you can just say, I'm not going out past 10 p.m. anymore, or I don't want to go out, or whatever. You don't have to, you can give as much or as little information as you want. But if you do that, and then the person is very kind and very responsive, and they're like, okay, cool, sounds good. It's obviously way easier to set a boundary with that person than someone who you tell them that, and then their response is, oh my God, you don't even like me anymore. You don't want to hang out. You're no fun. You're boring. You're this, you're that, right? So we all have examples of both of those things in our lives. And so just remember that someone pushing back on your boundary doesn't mean your boundary is wrong. Someone pushing back on your boundary doesn't mean that you don't feel what you feel, that you don't whatever. And remember, boundaries can change over time. So if you have this particular boundary for this certain amount of time, it doesn't mean it has to stay forever. It can, right? But you're not doing anything wrong if you need to have different boundaries, or your boundaries need to grow and change depending on what you're going through, what you're working towards all different factors of life. Okay. So just remember that usually, of course, is like the catch-22 of boundaries. The people who you have to be the most firm with your boundaries with are the people who typically will give you the most pushback on them. And that's where you can just, again, you're not responsible for their boundary or for their response to your boundary. Okay. And then you're also not responsible for any type of like manipulating or guilt tripping they do to you because of that boundary. So sometimes people might be like, they'll get passive aggressive, or they'll say, well, you're not fun. I don't want to hang out with you ever again. It's like, okay, like if you setting a boundary causes the relationship or whatever, anything to not continue on or to go through a hard time, right? That's not a good sign. Okay. People who really love and care about you will want to respect the boundaries you have, won't want to control you, will want you to, again, like as long as you're doing this from a place that's like, I've done my work, I'm clear, I'm committed, I'm not doing this in like a manipulative way, right? If your boundaries are pure and coming from like a good place in your heart, then you cannot be responsible for the way people are responding to you. And then, especially in those situations when someone has like a not super comfortable response to your boundary, it's up to you to remember that it's not just setting the initial boundary, it's about upholding the boundary, right? So when people do try to call you a name or say this or say that, or like I was saying, get passive aggressive with you, it's up to you to not drop down and match their energy and not be like, oh, I have to fix them, or I have to do this, or I have to do that, right? Just think, imagine in your mind, hopefully you have at least one person in your life like this. If not, just imagine it, okay? There will be people in your life who, when you set a boundary and you say, I'm not doing this anymore, or this doesn't work for me, or this is a new thing I'm doing, right? Boundaries can be also around what you allow into your life, that what you didn't before. And there are people in this world who do want to love you and accept you exactly as you are, and but will be very willing to say, okay, cool, sounds good. Love that you share that boundary with me, right? So again, when we look at boundaries as like just information of how the relationship can be healthier, then it's so much easier to not make it about us and not try to control or manipulate. And usually the only people who want to change or adjust your boundary are people who are benefiting from you not having that boundary, like in an unfair way, right? So they're siphoning your energy, they're taking advantage of you, they're whatever, right? But people who actually love you and care about you and want to see you thrive will gladly support, the boundaries that you put in for yourself. So this is, again, a level of being accountable to yourself, of just like, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, this is what I need to do, this is what I can't do. And then also not internalizing and not second guessing the boundary you need to set because someone does have a response that maybe doesn't feel the best to your boundary. Okay, that's everything I have for you. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today. If you ever want any more information about me, all that is linked below. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.